Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we're talking about a brand new studio album from Darkest Hour entitled Perpetual Terminal. This is the 10th full-length studio album and the first in nearly 7 years from this American metalcore and melodic death metal crew. I first came to know them back in 2014 with the release of their self-titled album, and I was not impressed. I was, however, impressed with 2017's Godless Prophets and the Migrant Flora. An absolutely cutthroat, volatile, bloodthirsty combination of hardcore energy and totally in-your-face, muscular, meaty, metal riffage. Just an absolutely badass fucking record from start to finish. One of the best metal albums of 2017, and though I've yet to hear everything in the Darkest Hour catalog and discography, I feel comfortable saying that out of everything I have heard so far, Godless Prophets and the Migrant Flora is the best and also my personal favorite. With this in mind, I went into Perpetual Terminal with relatively high expectations, and I feel that they've relatively sort of been met. It is fair to say that maybe I'm a little bit underwhelmed. I was hoping for something as crushing and as brutal, if not even more so, than Godless Prophets and the Migrant Flora, and I didn't get that, to be blunt, to be honest. But, to be fair and balanced, what I did get was pretty well written and performed and constructed and produced, with a few weak moments, a few subpar moments, but also some really strong and exciting moments as well. A lot of cool dynamics, a lot of interesting ideas and fun songs. In a press release on the Darkest Hour Bandcamp page, guitarist Mike Schliebaum writes, "The record's theme centers around the duality of survival while embracing rebirth. We keep killing parts of ourselves to make new parts and survive. The story of the record is the story of the band. We're still here, and we're giving the world a body of work that's representative of our music today." Expanding on that particular line about how the story of the record is the story of the band itself, that makes sense to me because I feel like this record musically is kind of taking a lot from across the band's career and discography and trying to blend it all into this one album. It has a somewhat smorgasbordian approach to songwriting. You know, you get little bits of really early Darkest Hour, you get little bits of early 2010s Darkest Hour, you get little bits and pieces of Godless Prophets and the Migrant Flora. It can be very emotive at times, it can be very intimate at times, and it can be very visceral at times. And that's all really cool. It's just that certain eras of the band are better than others, and as such, certain songs that dip into these certain eras are better than some songs that dip into these other certain eras. For instance, I'm really loving Societal Bile because I feel it's very much in line with what I loved about Godless Prophet and the Migrant Flora. It's rabid and manic and versatile and just super in-your-face and bloodthirsty. It reeks of piss and vinegar and sweat and anger. It has these really menacing, sinister, thrashy barrages complete with Slayer-esque wailing guitars, and it has these more muscular, churning kind of death metal grooves, and it also has some classic 90s metallic hardcore punk kind of beatdowns and growls. And the way that it very subtly weaves in darker melodic guitar work in the vein of really old school Unearth is pretty badass as well. On the flip side, however, I was not a huge fan of the album's opening number and title track, Perpetual Terminal, which just plays things a little bit too safe. It feels like a B-side that would have been released on a hypothetical EP released in between the Human Romance and the self-titled album. It does have a few sharp, rusty edges here and there, but not enough to leave much of an impact. It's ultimately an incredibly generic and forgettable number. I will say, though, ironically, there are some elements from the self-titled album era of Darkest Hour that are reintroduced into Darkest Hour with this album and are executed much better this time around, namely clean vocals. One with a Void, for instance, is a slower, more emotional, atmospheric kind of metalcore bruiser with some great use of more monotonous vocal patterns transitioning into some more soulful, anguished crooning. The drum work complements these vibes quite nicely with some very hypnotic patterns, and eventually we get an outburst of more like full-on heavy metal bombast with some roaring twin guitars and some yelling vocals, but it still has a lot of that impact and heart. A Prayer to the Holy Deaf is a solid cut as well. It channels some really old school Darkest Hour vibes and maybe just a little bit of like Killswitch Engage and like other mid-2000s melodic metalcore and even post-hardcore kind of bands with some more like yelling, anguished vocals and some really great melodic guitar work. Where this album really shines, though, is when it takes all of these elements and ideas and influences and sounds and mushes them together into something completely brand new. Take, for instance, the dark, moody, introspective, acoustic guitar-driven, metalcore power ballad that is Mausoleum. Or even the album's genuinely thunderous, ambitious, monumental, progressive closing number, Goddess of War, Give Me Something to Die For. Both of these cuts are genuinely unpredictable and mesmerizing, rich and chock full of some of the best vocal and guitar performances on the entire record. Sandwiched in between these cuts as well, you have My Only Regret, a genuinely pretty brutal and explosive, like, hardcore punk rager, which I'm absolutely loving. And The Nihilist Undone is kind of a fun one as well. I mean, it's filled with the hallmarks and tropes of, like, classic melodic metalcore, but it's also got a bunch of really satisfying grooves and some pretty technical musicianship that I was really impressed by. Perpetual Terminal is not a perfect record per se, and I definitely would have preferred something more totally brutal in the vein, once again, of Godless Prophets and the Migrant Flora, but it is a fun record. It does a good job at what it's actually trying to do, bringing together a bunch of different ideas and sounds from across the Darkest Hour discography. Some weak cuts here and there, some underwhelming moments, but all in all, I enjoyed it. I'm feeling a solid 3.5 out of 5 on this bad boy. I think if you're a longtime Darkest Hour fan, you're going to enjoy the crap out of this record, warts and all. I think if you're looking for something a little bit more visceral from modern metalcore, you will find it here in bits and pieces and little bursts. It's obviously way too soon to speculate on what the next Darkest Hour album might sound like, but my hope is that they either go back to the really super brutal shit, because that's what I like, or they take advantage of some of the more experimental and progressive cuts here, and they try to wiggle a little bit more outside the comfort zone, you know? But obviously, we can only cross that bridge when we get there. Hell, Darkest Hour obviously haven't even begun constructing the bridge in question. I'm getting ahead of myself, so yeah, let's just drop it. And let's just enjoy this record right now for what it is. 3.5 out of 5. I dug it. Honestly, I did. Maybe you will too. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. Look, there's even more videos here. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.